The New START treaty has officially expired, ending over 50 years of legally binding nuclear restraint between the United States and Russia. Russia has formally announced it is no longer restricted by warhead caps, while the Trump administration has allowed the pact to lapse. UN warns of a grave moment for international security as the world enters uncharted territory amidst the Russia-Ukraine war. A half-century of nuclear diplomacy has officially come to an end. At midnight, the New START treaty, the final remaining pillar of arms control between the world's two largest nuclear powers, expired. For the first time since 1969, there are no longer any legally binding limits on the strategic nuclear arsenals of the United States and Russia. The milestone marks a grave moment for international peace. Moscow has declared it is no longer bound by warhead restrictions, while Washington signals a shift toward a new, as of yet undefined era of competition. The expiration follows months of diplomatic gridlock. While President Vladimir Putin proposed an informal one-year extension in late 2025, the Trump administration chose not to follow through. President Trump's stance has been blunt. If it expires, it expires. He has promised a better agreement, but critics argue that letting the current framework lapse without a successor is a high-stakes gamble. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry warns that while they intend to act responsibly, they are ready to take decisive countermeasures if their national security is threatened. The verification regime, the eyes and ears of the treaty, is now permanently dark. A major point of contention for Washington is the rise of a third nuclear superpower. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized on Wednesday that any 21st century arms control must include China. With Beijing's stockpile rapidly expanding, the US argues that a bilateral deal with Russia is no longer sufficient. However, China has repeatedly rejected these calls, pointing to the massive disparity between its arsenal and the thousands of warheads held by the US and Russia. This trilaterality is the new hurdle that could prevent any new agreement for years to come. Without limits, the math of deterrence begins to change. Military planners on both sides may now feel compelled to build up their forces to counter worst-case scenarios. Former President Barack Obama warned that this could wipe out decades of diplomacy, while the Pope has urged both sides to do everything possible to avert a new arms race. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has labeled this a grave moment for international peace and security. He warned that the dissolution of decades of achievement could not come at a worse time, stating that the risk of a nuclear weapon being used is now the highest in decades. The risk isn't just about more warheads, it's about the loss of predictability. Without data exchanges and on-site inspections, the chance of a devastating miscalculation is at its highest point since the Cold War. The collapse of this treaty is inseparable from the fires of the Russia-Ukraine war. Since 2022, the conflict has seen a dangerous normalization of nuclear rhetoric. Early in the war, Russia made veiled suggestions about using tactical nuclear weapons to defend its territorial gains. Now, with almost 20% of Ukraine under occupation and NATO-Russia friction at an all-time high, the end of New START removes the final diplomatic safety net.
The world doesn't stop, neither do we. Subscribe to Midday for news that matters.